Last January, tens of thousands of Los Angeles area residents lost their homes in two major fires, the Eaton fire and the Pacific Palisades fire. Now, in response, the FireAid benefit concerts raised $100 million in order to help out Angelenos who lost their homes. We have a housing crisis. It's really bad in Los Angeles. There isn't enough housing to put everyone in a place to live. And so this money was desperately needed, $100 million. Wow. But several months later, many fire victims are now wondering, so what happened to that money? Because no one helped us out at all. Now, some organizations, some nonprofits, did receive grants from the FireAid Fund. So El Nido is one of them. Homegrown is another. Visión y Compromiso is another one. And then there's LA's Home for Native People. Those are specific nonprofits that received some grants. But many residents impacted by the fires, and especially those who were living in rent-controlled apartment units, want to know why they didn't get any help, why the FireAid fund didn't in any way go toward them and helping their situation out. And look, they've been reaching out to the administrators, the people behind this fundraising effort, to get some answers. And guess what? They are evading the questions, and they won't give any clear answers on how they decide to allocate funds or where any of the funds were allocated to. And the problem is that nonprofits don't have the same standards or reporting requirements that government agencies do. So there's been a lot of grifting happening, especially in a state like California, where NGOs have basically run amok. And I want to dig a little deeper into this particular fundraising effort to figure out what's going on here. Now, remember that FireAid raised $100 million, yet this is what the Annenberg Foundation brags about on its site. The Annenberg Foundation, by the way, is basically the group that takes the money and makes the allocation decisions. They're the ones who write the grants, okay? So keep that in mind. You're gonna wanna know that as we get deeper into this story. So the Annenberg Foundation fire relief grants to nonprofits in Los Angeles. They write about it in their website, and they raised $100 million. Get a load of this. Since the fires began on January 7th, the Annenberg Foundation, led by Chair Wallace Annenberg and its directors, with the foundation's community grant-making team, has committed and begun to pay, $3.175 million to more than 50 nonprofit community partners. Okay, what happened to the rest of the money? And more importantly, what are those other nonprofits that got the grants up to? What did they do to actually help the fire victims? We don't know. Reporter James Lee, who's also a contributor for Breaking Points, decided to dig in himself, and here's what he found.
All direct donations will be distributed under the advisement of the Annenberg Foundation. According to the IRS 990 form, the Annenberg Foundation is a 501c3 based in Conshohocken, Pennsylvania, in this lovely office building. One massive red flag right away is that only 33% of their annual expenses goes towards actual charity programs. The rest goes to administrative costs like executive compensation. And if you look at the numbers, they treat you pretty good over there, starting with top dog Cynthia Kennard, who's making $750,000 plus another 6 figures in bonuses, which is basically almost 7 figures just for one person there. Anyway, just to give you a point of comparison with another nonprofit, Doctors Without Borders, they spend almost 90% of their money on actual programs versus less than 1% on administrative costs.
There's this thing that people refer to called elite overproduction. Elite overproduction is when people who, went to college, they got their bachelor's, they got their master's, maybe they got their PhD. They then graduate, they look at the job market and they're like, oh wow, my education was worthless and I don't know what to do with this fancy degree. A lot of them end up working in NGOs, or they launch their own NGO. And a lot of those NGOs, big racket, huge. I believe, it is my opinion, that the Annenberg Foundation is a good example of what I'm talking about. So let's dig in a little deeper. Because he's right. The key executives and employees, the key employees, do get paid handsomely at this foundation. Let's take a look. So this was what he was showing in the video. Yes, Cynthia Kennard. She's the top dog, apparently. Her compensation is $735,612 a year. And then on top of that, she gets a $135,000, more than $135,000 in bonus. Okay. Second, you have Allison Holmes, Senior Director of Operations and Strategy, $359,053 for compensation, and then nearly $90,000 for bonus. Allison Holmes, that was Allison Holmes. Then you have Paul Manganiello. He's the treasurer, $333,455 for his salary. You get the point. You can see how the bulk of their money tends to go toward, administrators, the cost of operating. The foundation also spent nearly $1.2 million on travel, conferences, and meetings in 2023. That was the last year that we have tax filings for them. They also gave the Philadelphia Orchestra Association $2.7 million in 2023. Which was interesting because if you look at their tax filing, you'll notice that a lot of these grants for things like social justice programs, they mostly amounted like $25,000. But then certain things like what you're seeing on your screen right now really, really stood out to me. So basically, the Annenberg Foundation spending in 2023, like a massive portion of it went to something called the Wallace Annenberg Legacy Foundation. Now, Wallace Annenberg is the chairman of the board for the Annenberg Foundation, also the president and CEO of the Annenberg Foundation. She also happens to have all these other nonprofits. And so the Annenberg Foundation raises money and they write grants. It's just that the bulk of their grants, they write to themselves, sort of, because Wallace has all these other nonprofits that this nonprofit funnels the money to. So let's take a look at that graphic again, because you'll see all of the different grants. This is all in 1 year, by the way. This is all in 2023, okay? So there were 4 grants to the tune of $1,975,000. Then there was another grant to the tune of $150 million. That was funneled to the Wallace Annenberg Legacy Foundation. Interesting. Okay. And then another $1,137,950 went to the Wallace Annenberg Legacy Foundation. So those are all the grants that went to Wallace owned and operated nonprofits. Not listed in that graphic, by the way, is the additional $4.1 million that was given to the Wallace Annenberg Legacy Foundation and the $1 million that was given to the Wallace Annenberg Center for the Performing Arts. Okay. In sum, the Annenberg Foundation funneled nearly $159 million to other nonprofits belonging to Wallace Annenberg. So I explored the Wallace Annenberg Legacy Foundation's tax filings and get a load of this, okay? Because I was curious. Oh, wow, look at that. In 2023, the year that this, nonprofit got a huge influx of money, they had $172 million in revenue. So look, they basically had no revenue until 2023 when the Annenberg Foundation funneled money to the Wallace Annenberg Legacy Foundation. This is so crazy. By the way, they only had $15 million in charity-related expenses that year. And I'm specifically talking about the total revenue for the Wallace Annenberg Legacy Foundation. So they get this massive influx of money, okay? $159 million. And they only spend $15 million in expenses that year. Now, getting back to the FireAid and the money that was raised specifically for victims of those devastating fires, let's see where the Annenberg Foundation is providing some of these grants, because they are providing some other grants, to be fair. And our buddy looked into it. Let's take a look.
Local journalists have also been asking, where's the money? They found, quote, the FireAid website names only 3 Palisades organizations that receive grants. Among almost 120 organizations listed as receiving grants, none of whom are specific to Pacific Palisades, and those 3 are Kehelet Israel, Chabad of Pacific Palisades, and Palisades Charter High School. Others have tried to directly reach out to the Annenberg Foundation. They were kind of given the runaround, various extension numbers, somebody saying they would call them back, no one called back. Also referring them to some mysterious man named Philip, no last name. He was never found. This is just crazy. So essentially what they're doing is taking the $100 million, then paying themselves roughly 70% of it, and then the rest of the money they're dishing out to various other nonprofits with their own administrative expenses, and that's how $100 million just ends up disappearing.
This is how $24 billion in taxpayer money in the state of California was allegedly allocated to help the homeless. But homelessness has exploded since we spent that money. And that money is unaccounted for because it was funneled to all of these grifting nonprofits that have no interest in solving a damn thing. There are a bunch of people who went to college, got their fancy degrees, can't find a job, so they end up working for NGOs and nonprofits. And they still want to be rich. I mean, they did the hard work. They got the education. It's just that they want to be rich based off of money that's been fundraised for legitimate purposes. And they want to get rich off of, in a lot of cases, taxpayer money as well. Because these nonprofits get grants from both the federal government and also state and local government. And if we're going to do that, I think there needs to be a lot more oversight and reporting. And when it turns out that the money's unaccounted for, people should be prosecuted for that because they're stealing from us. I mean, I get that some people get real touchy about this because I'm talking about the state of California. I'm talking about a state that's completely controlled by Democrats. But guess what? Democrats be thieving too. And it's about time we wake up to that reality.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.